The great halls of the Galactic Council were silent that day. The shimmering domes of light that usually represented peace between worlds now seemed cold and distant. Every planet in the galaxy had its representatives seated in perfect order. Except one, the delegation from Earth stood apart, surrounded by tension so heavy it was almost visible. The voice of the council leader echoed through the chamber. His tone was calm, but there was no warmth in it. After much discussion and review, he said, "The Galactic Council has decided to remove the planet Earth from its membership." Effective immediately, the words struck like thunder. For a moment, no one moved. The human delegation remained still, frozen between disbelief and quiet fury. Around them, murmurs spread like a storm. Some alien leaders looked down in shame. Others looked satisfied, as if this was something they had wanted for a long time. Humanity had always been the youngest member of the council. They were new to the galactic stage, but their progress was fast. Too fast. In only a few centuries, humans had mastered technology that other civilizations had spent thousands of years developing. They could build ships that traveled between stars, harvest energy from dying suns, and heal diseases that once seemed impossible to cure. Their creativity and courage made them stand out, but it also made others uneasy. Rumors had been spreading for years that humans were unpredictable, that they could not be controlled, that they were too emotional, too ambitious. The council feared that one day Earth would challenge their authority. And so, rather than wait for that day to come, they decided to end the alliance altogether. The lead human delegate finally spoke, his voice calm but trembling slightly. "We joined this council in peace," he said. "We shared our discoveries, our technologies, even our hopes for a better galaxy. And now you cast us out because we refuse to stop growing?" No one answered. The council leader simply closed his hands and said, "The decision is final. Earth's access to interplanetary routes and council technology will be revoked. Your representatives are dismissed." Silence followed. The humans gathered their data pads and quietly left the chamber. No one stood up to defend them. No one offered a word of comfort. As the heavy doors closed behind them, the lights dimmed and the once proud symbol of the Galactic Union flickered weakly. Humanity had been erased from it. Back on Earth, the news spread faster than light. Screens across cities, colonies, and stations lit up with the same headline: "Earth expelled from the Galactic Council." People stood in disbelief. Some were angry, shouting that it was betrayal. Others were afraid, wondering how they would survive without the trade routes and shared resources that kept their economy alive. The council controlled everything, from fuel supplies to interstellar communication. Being cut off from them was almost like being cut off from the galaxy itself. But beneath the fear, something else began to grow. A quiet determination. For years, humanity had depended on the Council's technology and trade systems. They had believed in unity and peace. But now they were forced to look inward, to rediscover what it meant to rely on themselves. Leaders from every part of Earth gathered in one room: scientists, engineers, diplomats, and explorers. They had arguments, of course. Some wanted to beg for re-entry into the Council. Others said it was time to stand on their own. But as the discussions went on, one thing became clear. Begging was not an option. Earth had been humiliated, yes, but not defeated. In the months that followed, massive changes began. The world that had once been divided by nations and politics now started to unite. Old rivalries faded because everyone understood a simple truth: if they didn't work together now, they wouldn't survive at all. The skies above Earth turned into construction fields. Dozens of stations were built in orbit, hidden behind layers of cloaking and silence. There were no public announcements, no flashy shows. Every move was quiet and careful. The engineers worked around the clock, designing ships unlike anything the Council had ever seen. They used human ingenuity, not borrowed alien designs. The ships were sleeker, faster, stronger, and built with a purpose. They were not for conquest. They were for protection, independence, and pride. People from all walks of life volunteered to help. Farmers, miners, and students joined the new Terran Unity program, providing resources and manpower. Every human, no matter how small their role, felt like they were part of something greater. In secret, underground labs and orbital docks glowed with the hum of new technology. The first prototype, known simply as Project Dawn, was completed within 2 years. When it launched into space, only a handful of people were there to witness it. It wasn't a large ship, but it represented a dream, the dream that Earth could rise again without the Council's help. As the engines roared to life and the ship ascended beyond the clouds, those watching knew something had changed forever. Meanwhile, in the far reaches of the galaxy, rumors began to spread again. The Council received reports of human activity beyond their restricted zones. At first they ignored them, believing Earth had no resources to sustain itself. But when images leaked of massive construction in the Sol system, the Council began to worry. One Council member, from a world that once supported humanity, warned the others, "You think you've exiled them. But you've only given them freedom." The others laughed. They believed humans would collapse without their guidance. They underestimated what unity and pride could do to a species that had already survived wars, disasters, and countless challenges. Back on Earth, the mood was shifting. Where there was once sadness, there was now a sense of purpose. Humanity's exile had become a story of rebirth. Families talked about the future with hope. Children were taught that the stars were not forbidden, they were simply waiting. The pain of rejection had turned into motivation, and while the galaxy had closed its doors, the people of Earth had opened their minds wider than ever before. One evening, as the sun set over the Pacific Ocean, a message was broadcast across all human colonies. It wasn't from a leader or a general, but from the Earth Council, formed after the exile. The voice was calm, clear, and firm. "We have been cast out by those who feared our growth," it said. "They believed that by exiling us they could end our journey. But they have only given us the chance to define it ourselves. Let this be the start of something greater. We will not fade. We will not beg. We will build." Across the world, people stood and listened. Some cried, some cheered. But everyone felt the same spark inside them, the belief that humanity could turn its greatest loss into its greatest victory. That night, the skies above Earth were alive with lights. New ships left the atmosphere carrying the hopes of billions. Space stations blinked with fresh energy signatures. The same council that had expelled them was now watching from afar, uncertain of what Earth would do next. But the truth was simple. Humanity was no longer trying to rejoin them. Humanity was building something new, something that no one could take away. And though the galaxy thought Earth had been silenced, the blue planet had only just begun to speak again. After Earth's exile from the Galactic Council, silence filled the planet. It was the kind of silence that came after betrayal, a mix of anger, heartbreak, and disbelief. No one spoke about it openly at first. The pain was too fresh, the humiliation too deep. But beneath that silence, something powerful began to grow, a quiet determination to rise again. The governments of Earth, once divided by politics and pride, were forced to sit together for the first time in decades. There was no applause, no celebration, only tired faces, sleepless eyes, and one common goal: to survive without the Council. No one said it aloud, but everyone in that room knew what it meant. The galaxy had turned its back on humanity. There would be no more trade routes, no more alien technology, no more shared research. Earth would have to start from scratch. At first, panic spread. Factories that depended on off-world supplies began to close. Space stations that relied on imported fuel started shutting down one by one. People lost jobs. Cargo ships that once traveled freely through interstellar space were grounded. It felt like the end, but it wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something entirely new. In an old underground base hidden beneath the ice of Antarctica, a group of scientists gathered. The place had been abandoned for years, a leftover from the early space race. But now it was being brought back to life. Huge generators hummed again, the cold halls filled with voices, plans, and ideas. There were no aliens helping them this time. No advanced technology handed over in secret meetings. Only human minds, human hands, and human courage. They began to design new propulsion systems, new energy sources, new materials. The goal was simple: to build something that the Council had never expected. A fleet made entirely by humans, for humans. The early designs were rough. Many failed before they even reached testing. But every failure became a lesson. Every mistake became a step forward. Slowly, the dream started taking shape. Far above the planet in Earth's orbit, massive construction rings began to appear. The Council's patrols were forbidden from entering Earth's system. But even from a distance, They could see the strange metallic shapes forming around the planet. The council called it reckless human activity. They believed Earth was wasting its remaining resources trying to imitate their ships. But the truth was far greater than they could imagine. These weren't just ships. They were the foundation of a new identity, a symbol of independence. Each ship was built in silence away from the galactic network, using hidden communication frequencies and coded transmissions. The workers on those projects didn't talk much. They worked long hours, sometimes sleeping in their suits, sometimes going days without seeing the sun. But they didn't complain. Every nut, every bolt, every spark of the welding torch meant something. It was proof that humanity still had the fire to fight back, not with weapons but with willpower. Meanwhile, on the ground, life slowly adjusted. People started growing their own food instead of importing it from alien colonies. Engineers learned to repair things manually instead of waiting for automated machines. Young students spent nights studying physics, robotics, and space engineering, hoping to one day be part of Earth's comeback. In the middle of hardship, unity was born. The media stopped talking about the exile like it was a tragedy. Instead, they called it the turning point. Artists painted murals of Earth's future across the ruins of old buildings. Writers described visions of a self-reliant civilization, no longer begging for permission to dream. Something had changed in the human spirit. The council had thought they were punishing Earth, but what they had really done was free it. Months turned into years. The first fleet began to take form. From the icy rings of Saturn to the dark side of the moon, hidden bases worked non-stop. The ships they built were not elegant like the council's vessels. They were raw, powerful, and uniquely human. Each one carried markings, not of governments but of unity. The blue and white insignia of Earth shone proudly on their hulls. Engineers began referring to them as the Terran fleet. The day the first ship powered up, there was no grand ceremony. Only a handful of engineers stood on the control platform, watching the engines roar to life. The deep vibration filled the hangar, echoing like a heartbeat. Someone whispered softly, "We did it." The ship lifted slowly from the dock, its surface glowing from the energy thrusters. As it broke through the atmosphere and vanished into the dark sky, a single thought ran through everyone's mind. Earth was back. But outside Earth's orbit, the galaxy was watching. Rumors spread again across the stars. Some alien species admired humanity's courage. Others mocked it, saying Earth was building toys that could never match real fleets. Yet deep down, even they were curious. Humanity had survived isolation far better than anyone expected. In hidden corners of the galaxy, a few traders, risking the Council's wrath, started dealing with Earth in secret. They exchanged rare minerals and information in return for human-made technology. Slowly, quietly, humanity began to re-enter the galactic stage. Not as a member of the Council, but as an independent power. The leaders of Earth held a meeting once more, this time not in fear but with determination. The question was simple. What do we do next? Some suggested rebuilding relationships. Others said they should stay hidden until they were strong enough to defend themselves. But one voice rose above the rest. "Let's not fight them," said a calm voice. "Let's outgrow them." Those words changed everything. Humanity's mission was no longer about revenge or pride. It was about evolution, about showing the galaxy what humans could do when pushed to their limits. Soon, a quiet network was formed, a group of explorers, scientists and engineers who called themselves the Founders. Their job was to expand beyond the solar system, finding worlds that could sustain life, gathering resources, and spreading Earth's reach farther than ever before. The Founders became heroes, not through war but through discovery. Each mission they launched carried the same message: humanity endures. As months passed, new colonies began to appear on distant moons and asteroids. Each one was connected through secure human-made communication channels. They were independent, self-sustaining, and untouchable by the Council's authority. For the first time in history, Earth was not just a planet, it was a growing network of human worlds. But even with all this progress, no one forgot the exile. It was still painful to remember how humanity had been treated. The Council had once looked down on them as reckless children. Now they were being forced to watch as those same children built something beyond their understanding. Yet Earth didn't celebrate openly. There were no threats, no speeches, no shows of power. Everything continued in silence. Humanity was too focused on building to waste time proving itself. That was the true strength of the silent resolve. It wasn't about shouting their success to the stars. It was about quietly reshaping destiny piece by piece, until even the galaxy would have to admit that they had been wrong. One quiet night, on a mountain observatory far from the cities, a small group of people stood watching the sky. Above them, tiny flashes of light blinked, ships leaving the atmosphere, satellites forming networks, stations aligning in orbit. "Do you ever think we'll be accepted again?" one of them asked softly. The older man beside her smiled faintly. "We don't need their acceptance," he said. "We just need to keep moving forward," the girl nodded. Together, they watched as another bright streak crossed the sky, vanishing into the unknown. Somewhere out there, humanity's future was being written, one ship, one station, one dream at a time. And even though the galaxy thought Earth was silent, the truth was that every hum of an engine, every spark from a welder's hand, every heartbeat of every person working in those hidden docks was part of a greater sound. It was the sound of human resolve, quiet, steady, and unstoppable. Years passed quietly after the exile. The galaxy had almost forgotten about Earth, or so it thought. But beneath the calm blue glow of that small planet, something extraordinary was unfolding. Humanity, once broken and humiliated, was rising again, not just rebuilding but reinventing itself. From orbit, Earth looked peaceful. Oceans shimmered under the sun, and city lights formed glowing webs across the dark side of the planet. But behind those lights were massive construction centers, secret labs, and training academies working day and night. Every nation, every mind, every hand was building toward one shared goal: to make sure Earth would never bow to the Galactic Council again. The new generation that had grown up after the exile didn't remember the humiliation firsthand. They were born into a world of rebuilding and determination. For them, the Council wasn't a dream of unity. It was a warning. Teachers told them, "Never let others decide your future again." That message echoed in every classroom, every workshop, every training field. In orbit, the first fleet of ships floated like silver giants. They were powerful, sharp-edged, and unmistakably human in design. Unlike the sleek, curved vessels of the Council, Earth's ships looked raw, industrial yet beautiful in their simplicity. They carried a kind of strength that came from hard work and defiance. The first of them, a massive command vessel named Eden Prime, became a symbol of human resilience. Its launch was not a public event. There were no news reporters, no crowds cheering. Only the builders, the engineers, and the crew stood together as the ship powered up for the first time. As its engines roared to life, a deep vibration shook the docks. People looked up in awe. Someone whispered softly, "We've done it. Earth is ready." That moment wasn't just the birth of a ship, it was the birth of a new era. Humanity had moved from survival to strength. Earth's leadership no longer called themselves a Council of Nations. That title belonged to the past. Now they used a new term, the Terran Alliance. It wasn't about borders or governments anymore. It was about one shared identity, humanity. The alliance wasn't built on power or politics. It was built on trust and unity. Scientists worked with soldiers, farmers helped engineers, and miners provided materials for space construction. Every person had a role. Every effort mattered. The early years of the alliance were not easy. Supplies were limited. Mistakes were made. Some ships were lost in deep space, and there were times when hope felt thin. But each failure pushed them to learn faster, to work smarter, to grow stronger. Slowly, Earth's reach began to expand. Stations were built on Mars, mining bases on the moons of Jupiter, and research colonies in the asteroid belt. People lived under strange skies, breathing air made by machines, and watching Earth rise like a small blue jewel in the distance. Life in space was tough. Days were long and loneliness crept in often. But there was pride in every breath, knowing that humanity was carving its own path without help, without permission. The workers on these colonies often said, "We're not just living for Earth, we're building for our children." And they meant it. Each new outpost carried not only supplies and technology, but also pieces of art, music, and culture, reminders of what made them human. Back in the Galactic Center, the Council began to notice. Reports started coming in from trade ships and explorers. Human fleets were being spotted beyond restricted zones. Their numbers were growing. Their designs were advanced. But what shocked the council most was that humans weren't expanding aggressively. They weren't attacking anyone. They were simply building quietly, confidently. At first, the council dismissed the reports. They'll collapse soon, one official said. They don't have the resources to sustain that kind of growth. But as months turned into years, the reports kept coming, and they told a different story. Earth's fleets weren't collapsing. They were multiplying. Inside the Terran Alliance headquarters, meetings became more focused. Every conversation revolved around the same question. How do we protect what we've built? The answer came naturally by creating something greater than a fleet. By building an empire. Not an empire of control or domination, but an empire of unity, strength, and independence. A network of human worlds bound by a single vision. To ensure humanity's survival in a universe that had once rejected it. And so, quietly, the Terran Empire was born. There were no coronations, no crowns, no rulers. The empire wasn't about one leader. It was about every person who had endured. Every hand that had worked. Every mind that had refused to give up. The word empire once carried fear, but for humanity it now meant freedom. It meant never being dependent again. The Terran flag was raised for the first time in the orbit of Mars, a simple blue and white banner with a single shining star in the center. It symbolized Earth standing alone in the dark, yet bright enough to light its own way. The first major milestone of the new empire came when human ships made contact with a distant system once considered unreachable. The voyage took years, but when they arrived, they found a world rich in resources and perfectly suited for colonization. They called it New Horizon. The news spread like wildfire across the colonies. For the first time since exile, humanity had not just built fleets. They had found a new home beyond the old maps of the Council. It was proof that their dream was working. Humanity wasn't just surviving, they were expanding. On Earth, celebrations broke out, not loud or wild, but heartfelt. Families gathered in the streets. Children drew pictures of spaceships and new planets. Scientists received messages of thanks from workers, miners, and pilots. Everyone knew they were part of something greater than themselves. And yet, through all the excitement, Earth remained humble. There were no threats, no messages to the Council, no demands for recognition. The silence of humanity had become its greatest strength. While others boasted, humanity built. While others argued, humanity advanced. But deep in the shadows of the galaxy, not everyone was happy. Some members of the Galactic Council grew restless. They had once believed Earth to be a minor species, dependent and fragile. Now they were witnessing the rise of something powerful, something they could no longer control. They began holding secret meetings, discussing how to manage the growing influence of the Terran Empire. Some wanted diplomacy, others wanted force, but none of them truly understood how far humanity had come. For them, humans were still the same species they had exiled long ago. They didn't realize that exile had changed everything, that it had created a unity no weapon could break. As the years went on, Earth's empire grew stronger and more organized. Trade routes were opened between colonies. Advanced spaceports replaced old orbital docks. Artificial intelligence systems were built, not to control people, but to help them work faster and safer. Education programs spread across every world. Children were taught about the past, but also the lessons it carried. They learned that freedom wasn't something given. It was something earned. And while other civilizations grew comfortable in their routines, humanity continued pushing boundaries. They developed faster engines, cleaner energy, and defense systems capable of protecting entire star systems. They didn't prepare for war, but they were ready for one, if it ever came. One night, standing in the observatory of Eden Prime, an officer looked out at the stars. The vast darkness of space stretched endlessly before him, dotted with distant lights, some friendly, some unknown. He spoke softly, as if talking to the universe itself. "They thought exile would destroy us," he said. "But exile made us remember who we are." And somewhere, deep in that endless night, a new kind of light flickered, a signal from one of the farthest human colonies. It was a simple message, just 2 words long: "We endure." That message spread across every station, every colony, every ship. People repeated it like a promise. It became humanity's motto, carved into the hulls of ships, printed on flags. and whispered in the silence of space. The Terran Empire was not built on anger. It was built on endurance, unity, and vision. And though the Council still refused to acknowledge Earth, the galaxy was beginning to see the truth. The humans who had once been exiled were no longer outsiders. They were now builders of worlds, protectors of hope, and pioneers of a new era. They didn't just construct a fleet, they built an empire of their own. For a long time, the Galactic Council had stopped paying attention to Earth. They believed the humans had accepted their exile quietly and would eventually fade into irrelevance. But the universe is full of surprises, and this one hit them harder than anyone could have imagined. It started with whispers. Traders passing through border systems claimed they saw massive fleets carrying the blue and white insignia of Earth. Scientists reported strange, new energy readings coming from sectors that were once considered empty. Some even said that human ships had been spotted helping smaller civilizations that the Council had ignored. At first, the Council dismissed these reports as exaggerations. But soon there were too many to ignore. Something was happening out there in the dark, far beyond their control, and it had the same signature they once erased from their records: Earth. Inside the great chamber of the Galactic Council, tension began to rise. The circular room that once echoed with calm diplomacy now buzzed with unease. Holograms flickered above the central table, showing blurred images of enormous ships and human-built stations that dwarfed anything the Council had ever approved. The leader of the Council leaned forward, his voice sharp. How can this be? They were cut off from our systems. They had no access to our technologies. One of the advisors spoke carefully. They built their own, sir. Human designs. Simple at first, but efficient. And now, it seems they've surpassed even us. The room fell silent. No one wanted to admit the truth, but it was clear. The very species they had expelled in arrogance had done the impossible. They had rebuilt without help, without approval, and without fear. Meanwhile, out in the distant colonies, the humans were thriving. The Terran Empire had grown stronger than ever. Trade routes stretched across dozens of systems, connecting planets where once there had been only silence. Every station flew the same flag, and every ship carried the same message. Earth stands united. Humanity's progress wasn't driven by greed or conquest. It was driven by purpose. They built not to dominate, but to survive, to explore, to prove they could be more than what the Council had labeled them. Their ships now used new forms of energy, cleaner, faster, and more stable than the Council's ancient reactors. Their defense systems were unmatched, designed not for aggression, but to ensure that no one could ever threaten them again. The turning point came when the first human dreadnought, the largest ship ever built, entered neutral space. Its size was breathtaking. It moved slowly, like a floating continent of steel and light, carrying thousands of crew and hundreds of smaller ships within its hull. When it appeared on Council scanners, the alarm spread instantly. Council members rushed into emergency sessions demanding explanations. Why are they moving such a fleet into neutral zones? Are they preparing for war? One shouted. But when the Council tried to open communication channels, the human ships remained silent. They didn't respond to hails. They didn't send threats. They simply passed through space peacefully, leaving behind a trail of awe and confusion. It wasn't a show of power, it was a statement. A silent reminder that Earth no longer needed anyone's permission to exist. The Council called for an urgent meeting. The entire galaxy watched as the most powerful civilizations gathered once again to discuss the planet they had once thrown away. Some members urged caution. We cannot risk confrontation, one said. If we provoke them, it could lead to war. Others, more prideful, argued differently. They are still a young race. We made them what they are. Without us, they would still be crawling on their homeworld. We must remind them who holds authority. But the truth was becoming impossible to deny. Humanity had outgrown their control. In the middle of one of these heated sessions, a transmission appeared on the Council's central screen. It wasn't from an ambassador or a diplomat. It was from Earth's new leadership. The image was calm and steady, showing the Earth emblem shining behind a simple desk. A voice spoke, calm and confident. To the Galactic Council, it began. We remember your decision. You cast us out when we refused to stop growing. You turned your backs on us when we asked for fairness. But we have learned something in our exile, that freedom cannot be granted by others. It must be earned. The council chamber fell silent. No one interrupted. The voice continued. We do not seek war. We do not seek revenge. We only seek respect, the same respect you denied us. We are not your subjects. We are not your children. We are your equals. And then the transmission ended with a simple line that echoed through every corner of the galaxy. You turned your backs on us. Now we no longer need your permission to exist. The message spread faster than light. Across planets, moons, and stations, people replayed it again and again. For many smaller civilizations, it was more than a message, it was inspiration. There were species who had long lived under the Council's rules, feeling powerless and overlooked. When they heard Earth's words, something inside them shifted. They began to question why they too had accepted control for so long. The Council began to lose its hold not through war but through ideas. Earth had said aloud what others had only dared to think. Back on Earth, people watched the reactions unfold across the galaxy. But they didn't celebrate loudly. There were no parades, no speeches. They simply went back to work, building more ships, expanding colonies, improving technology. Humanity had learned that true power didn't come from shouting, it came from action. The Terran Empire grew quietly stronger each day. Its fleets protected trade routes, its scientists pushed boundaries, and its colonies flourished. They welcomed travelers, offered help to smaller worlds, and formed new friendships built on trust, not dominance. For the first time in history, the galaxy began to look at Earth not as a problem, but as a leader. In the council chambers, panic deepened. Reports flooded in. Worlds were pulling away from the council's authority, choosing to deal directly with Earth instead. Trade routes that once flowed through council space were now being redirected toward human-controlled systems. Even the black markets preferred Terran technology because it was cheaper, cleaner, and more reliable. The council tried to fight back by spreading propaganda. They warned that Earth's empire was dangerous, that humans would eventually seek control. But the more they spoke, the less people believed them. Everyone could see what was happening. Humanity wasn't threatening anyone. They were simply succeeding, and that success terrified the Council more than any weapon ever could. In a desperate attempt to regain control, the Council sent envoys to Earth, offering to reopen talks. But Earth didn't respond immediately. Weeks passed in silence. Finally, a single message arrived. We appreciate your concern, but we have already chosen our own path. The time for negotiations ended when you chose exile. It wasn't anger, it was closure. Late one night, in the observation deck of a Terran station orbiting Neptune, a small group of engineers gathered to watch the stars. One of them pointed to a glowing light in the distance. That's one of the Council's patrol fleets, he said quietly. The others looked calm and unafraid. Let them watch, someone said. We're not hiding anymore. They stood in silence for a moment, gazing at the endless sky. The stars above no longer felt unreachable. They felt like home. The Earth that had once begged for inclusion now stood as a beacon of independence. The Council's power was fading, while humanity's influence spread like light through the darkness. From that moment on, everything changed. The galaxy had a new balance. The Council was no longer the unquestioned ruler of the stars. A new power had risen, not through conquest but through perseverance, unity, and vision. Earth had proven something profound, that exile was not punishment, but opportunity. They had been silenced once, but now their silence spoke louder than words, and while the Council panicked, humanity simply kept building stronger, wiser, and freer than ever before. The age of dependence was over. The age of the Terran Empire had truly begun. As Earth's influence spread across the galaxy, an invisible line began to form, one that divided the stars themselves. On one side stood the old Galactic Council, struggling to hold its authority together. On the other side stood Earth, no longer the outcast but a growing power that inspired both fear and admiration. The universe was changing faster than anyone had expected. Every week brought new stories of colonies joining Earth's alliance. Small planets that once relied on the Council for protection now reached out to the Terran Empire for help, and Earth welcomed them, not as subjects but as partners. To many it was a revolution of hope, but to the Council it was a disaster. The Council's main chambers, once filled with confidence, now felt cold and tense. Reports kept arriving from every direction. More worlds leaving, more ships refusing Council orders, more trade shifting toward Earth. "We cannot lose the core systems," one member said, slamming his hand on the table. "If this continues, there will be nothing left for us to govern." Another replied bitterly, "We created this. When we cast Earth out, we didn't just exile a world, we exiled an idea. Now that idea is spreading and we can't stop it." They tried everything. They sent diplomats, offered trade incentives, even promised reforms. But the galaxy had already made its choice. The age of blind obedience was over. Meanwhile, in the heart of the Terran Empire, life had taken on a new rhythm. From the shining towers of Earth to the farthest mining outposts, there was a sense of unity that had never existed before. People worked harder, but they also dreamed bigger. Every colony had its own challenges, but they were connected by one powerful belief: that humanity was writing its own story now. Children learned about the past, about how their ancestors had once been rejected and humiliated, and how they had turned that pain into strength. Scientists, engineers, and explorers worked day and night not for fame or wealth, but for something greater, to ensure that no human would ever be powerless again. Far beyond the known trade routes, a group of Terran ships discovered a cluster of uncharted worlds rich in resources. Instead of claiming them by force, the humans sent invitations to nearby civilizations. They offered to share the discovery equally, to build together. For the first time in galactic history, cooperation replaced competition. The Council couldn't understand it. They had always ruled through control and hierarchy, but Earth's method was different. It was built on trust, respect, and opportunity. And that difference was breaking the old order apart. The Council grew desperate. Rumors spread that they were secretly funding anti-Earth movements in some neutral zones, hoping to create chaos that would slow down the Terran rise. But those efforts failed too. The more the Council tried to divide others, the more united they became around Earth's vision. Even some former Council officers began to defect, quietly joining Terran fleets. They spoke of corruption and pride within the Council, and how humanity had restored their faith in fairness. Each defection was another crack in the old empire. One evening, in a grand Terran city built on the edge of Mars, the air was filled with soft golden light. A crowd gathered in the central square as a massive hologram flickered to life, showing the symbol of Earth surrounded by dozens of allied worlds. A message played across the sky. "Together, we build. Together we rise. No one is forgotten." People cheered, not out of arrogance, but pride. It was a quiet, steady kind of pride, the kind that comes from earning your place through effort, not power. And somewhere out there, millions of others watched from their own worlds, whispering the same thought: maybe we can do the same. Back in the Council chambers, the leaders argued endlessly. Some wanted to confront Earth directly, while others begged for diplomacy. But deep down, everyone knew it was too late. Earth no longer needed their approval, their recognition, or their systems. They had become self-sufficient financially, technologically, and spiritually. A younger Council member finally stood up and said what others were too afraid to admit. "Perhaps," he said, "the humans did not fail us. We failed them. We tried to rule them when we should have learned from them." His words hung heavy in the air. No one responded, because deep inside they knew he was right. Out among the stars, Terran fleets continued exploring, but not for conquest. They built communication stations on lonely moons, established peace corridors where ships of any species could travel safely, and offered medical help to colonies that had been abandoned by the Council. The universe was slowly transforming. Even planets that once looked down on Earth now sought its guidance. The balance of power was no longer based on fear, it was based on cooperation. And yet behind all this progress, a quiet tension remained. There were whispers that the Council was preparing something drastic, a final attempt to reclaim control. Some believed they were developing new weapons, while others thought they were planning a political coup. The Terran leaders debated how to respond. Some wanted to prepare for defense. Others said, "No, we must not become what they were. Let our strength come from patience, not fear." And so, instead of responding with threats, Earth sent a message to the Council, one final gesture of peace. It was short, clear and sincere. We remember what was done, but we choose not to repeat it. The future does not belong to rulers, it belongs to builders. The message spread everywhere. Billions heard it, and most were moved by it. Even within the council, some members began to question everything they had stood for. On the far edge of known space, a Terran explorer ship discovered an ancient structure, older than the council itself. Inside, they found records hinting that once, long ago, other civilizations had faced the same choice, between pride and progress, between control and cooperation. It was as if the universe itself was reminding them that history repeats, but only until someone decides to change it. And this time, it was Earth that had chosen to change it. As months turned into years, the divide between Earth and the Council grew clearer. The Council controlled fewer systems, fewer fleets, fewer allies. Their influence faded like a dying star. Meanwhile, Earth continued to shine brighter. They built new academies to train ambassadors, not soldiers. They created projects that restored damaged ecosystems across planets. They sent relief missions to dying worlds that the Council had ignored. And the most powerful symbol of all, a massive, shining structure called the Hall of Unity, was built in orbit above Earth. It wasn't a fortress, but a meeting place where any species, big or small, could come and speak freely. For the first time, the galaxy had a true place of equality. The Council refused to attend its opening ceremony. They saw it as a challenge to their legacy. But other civilizations came, dozens of them. The hall was filled with voices from every corner of the galaxy, speaking different languages but sharing one message. We choose peace. We choose progress. For the first time in centuries, the stars seemed at peace. But deep within the Council's remaining strongholds, resentment grew. Some leaders refused to let go of their pride. They began secret meetings, whispering plans to bring Earth down before their influence disappeared forever. And though Earth had no desire for conflict, their spies soon discovered the truth. The humans realized something. The old powers would never give up easily. There would be one last struggle, a test of everything they had built. But this time, they were ready. The Great Divide wasn't just about power, it was about belief. The Council believed in control. Earth believed in cooperation. And as the galaxies watched, waiting to see which path would shape the future, the universe stood on the edge of a new dawn. The next step would decide everything. Would the old ways return? Or would the new light of unity finally shine across every world? Earth didn't seek an answer through war or words. They believed time itself would decide. Because when truth stands firm long enough, even the stars begin to listen. And somewhere, far from the chaos of politics and pride, a child looked up at the night sky, saw the streak of a passing ship, and whispered the same dream shared by billions. Years had passed since Earth's exile turned into triumph. What had once been an act of rejection had now become the reason for an entirely new age. The Terran Empire was no longer a small alliance. It was now a network of worlds connected by trust, vision, and courage. But peace in the galaxy was fragile. Though most civilizations had joined Earth's cause, the old Council still existed, tired, bitter, and holding on to whatever power it could. They were a shadow of their former strength, but even a shadow can be dangerous when cornered. From their hidden stations, the Council began spreading rumors, claims that Earth was secretly building weapons, planning to conquer, to control. It was the same fear they had used for centuries to keep others in line. But this time it didn't work. The galaxy had changed. People had seen Earth's actions. They had witnessed help arriving where the Council once sent silence. They had seen human engineers rebuilding destroyed habitats, Terran medics saving alien lives, and ambassadors mediating peace where once there had been endless fighting. The truth was clear. Earth didn't want domination. It wanted balance. Still, the Council wasn't done. One morning, deep in the Terran Command Center orbiting Saturn, an alert echoed through the halls. Unknown fleets had entered neutral zones, massive ships carrying old Council insignias. They weren't responding to hails. The officers gathered around the central screen, silent and tense. For years, Earth had avoided conflict. They believed they could inspire through peace. But now it seemed the past was knocking at their door again. The highest-ranking Terran commander looked out the observation window, watching the stars shimmer beyond the glass. If they come for us, he said quietly, we will not start the fight, but we will end it. There was no anger in his voice, only resolve. Across the galaxy, the news spread fast. Civilizations held their breath. The Council was mobilizing one last time, a desperate attempt to reclaim control, to prove that the age of Earth was nothing but an illusion. But Earth didn't respond with threats. Instead, they opened their communication channels to the entire galaxy, broadcasting a message that would echo forever in history. A calm human voice spoke. To the Council, and to every being who listens, this is not our war. We will not destroy what we have built to satisfy the pride of a few. But if you cross our borders, if you endanger our people, we will defend every life that trusts in us. It wasn't a challenge, it was a promise. When the Council's fleets entered the outer zones, they expected resistance, missiles, blockades, warnings. But instead, they found something they had never seen before. Human ships didn't advance to attack. They formed protective rings around allied planets, creating shimmering shields that stretched like curtains of light across the stars. Civilian transports and neutral ships moved safely inside them, untouched. The Council's admirals hesitated. They could fire first, but doing so would mean striking innocent lives. For the first time, they realized that the humans had changed the very rules of power. This wasn't about who had the most ships. It was about who had the most purpose. On one of the Council's flagships, an old commander watched the human defense line and felt something strange inside him. Shame. He had been part of the Council for centuries, believing they were protecting the galaxy. But now, looking at those glowing Terran shields protecting billions of lives, he began to question everything. Maybe, he whispered, they were right all along. His officers said nothing. The silence spoke for everyone. Moments later, he ordered his fleet to stand down. Across space, similar choices were being made. One by one, Council ships began lowering their weapons, refusing to fight. Some even sent messages to Earth asking for peace. The great war that everyone feared never truly began, because when faced with true unity, even pride bows to truth. After that day, the stars seemed quieter. The Council's last strongholds fell not to invasion, but to choice. Their members left voluntarily, seeking new beginnings under Earth's vision of freedom and cooperation. The Galactic Council was no more. In its place, something new was born, a network of worlds led not by dominance but by dialogue. Earth didn't claim ownership of it. Instead, they invited every world, big or small, to take part equally. They called it the Alliance of Light. Every planet had a voice. Every being had a right to speak. And every decision was made together. It was not perfect, but it was honest. Back on Earth, the skies were alive with color as the planet celebrated the new era. Massive ships hovered over the oceans, reflecting sunlight like floating cities. Children pointed to the stars, knowing that humanity was no longer alone. No longer feared, no longer forgotten. On the surface, a grand gathering took place in what was once the United Nations Plaza. Now it was the heart of the Alliance. Delegates from hundreds of species stood together on one stage, their different forms shining under the same light. An elder from one of the distant colonies stepped forward to speak. Long ago, he said softly, Earth was cast out and left to die. But instead of dying, they built a home for all of us. They turned exile into strength and darkness into light. Today we honor not their power, but their heart. The crowd fell silent, then erupted into applause that echoed across the city, across the planet, and across the stars. That night, Earth's skies were brighter than ever. Fleets of ships drifted peacefully above, their lights twinkling like new constellations. On a small balcony overlooking the horizon, a young engineer watched them quietly. He thought about the stories his grandparents told him, of the time when Earth had been rejected, humiliated, and forced to start from nothing. Now those same stories were part of history books, reminders of how far they had come. He smiled and whispered to himself, we didn't just survive, we became something greater. Far away in the ruins of the old Council's main station, silence ruled. The once crowded halls were now empty, filled only with echoes of a forgotten age. On one of the walls, the Council's motto was still visible, order above all, but it was covered by new markings, symbols left by travelers passing through. They had carved a single line beneath it, freedom above fear. And in that single phrase, the entire story of humanity was written. As decades passed, the Alliance of Light flourished. Entire galaxies once divided by mistrust now worked together to share resources, rebuild broken worlds, and explore the unknown. Humanity's fleet, once created for defense, now became the great explorers of the stars. Their mission changed from protection to discovery. They charted distant nebulae, reached beyond known galaxies, and searched for the mysteries of creation itself. Each mission carried the same message engraved on its hull: "We rise together." Generations later, children across the galaxy studied the history of Earth, the planet that refused to give up. They learned about the exile, the struggle, and the rise of the Terran Empire. But most importantly, they learned that greatness is not built through power. It is built through unity, resilience, and belief. Whenever someone felt small or hopeless, they looked up at the night sky and remembered the story of the humans who were once rejected, who faced the vastness of the universe alone, and who turned that loneliness into light for all. And so, the story that began in exile ended in peace. Earth had not only survived its punishment, it had redefined what civilization meant. It had proven that even when cast aside, the human spirit could build an empire not of fear or control, but of hope and cooperation. The universe, once divided, now stood united under a new dawn. And as the first rays of sunlight touched Earth's surface each morning, it reminded everyone, no matter the species, no matter the world, that even the smallest light can change the darkness forever.